a lot of people talk about the suppression of free energy going back to Nikola Tesla and the Warden Cliff Tower. You know,
Mm, that thing
there's
behind
the
me.
Warden.
Yeah. Demolished in 1917 by J.P. Morgan. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, the thing is, personally, I don't know whether he was planning on a wireless, you know, global network where people could not have to plug in to the grid, you know. And JP Morgan was like, no, that's not, you know, I don't want that.
If I can't put a
So,
meter on it, I don't want it, he said.
right. But you see, I don't know if that is necessarily free energy or not, because, you know, he could just be using, um, you know, like water turbines
It could
to
just be,
create,
yeah. It could just the key point is generation. What's the generation
right,
system, not the power transmission system. This is why when people
right,
say hydrogen fuel is free energy, it's not, because it's simply an energy transmission or energy delivery system. The key point
right,
is what kind of generator does it use?
right.
Mm.
So that's why now when it comes to the suppression of free energy, this began in the year 1947. Now, what happened was there was an experiment called the Lamb shift, Lambshift, Lamb shift. Now, I have been studying this thing for a long time, and so the Lamb shift was just the beginning of it. What they did was that they were able to produce hydrogen with less energy than what is normally requires to produce hydrogen. And if you can produce hydrogen with less energy and convert it back to electricity, then you get more energy out than in. So this was discovered in 1947. And for so many years I've been following this, you know, ever since, well, really since 2000, you know, I've been what is this Lamb shift? And all that was available was the journal entry. This Lamb guy made a journal entry, and if you look at the journal entry, it said this article is not available to the public.
All right.
You know, so this was been hidden ever since 1947. That they were able to get more energy out than in from this hydrogen experiment. And that was just the beginning of it. There's been many, many, many experiments since then. But the interesting thing now is now if you go to Wikipedia and you type lamb shift, they've released it. Finally, after so many years, you know, I've been trying to find out this what is this lamb shift ever since 2000. And finally, just like last year or this year even, they finally started releasing what is this lamb shift.
Right, that's
And if
interesting
you
because
read the
it's been kept quiet for as long as Roswell, and now it's suddenly appeared. Um, do you believe that that's a part of something more systemic? They've released this lamb shift thing.
well, see, this is what I'm talking about. There's three confessions coming out. One is that we faked the Apollo missions. Two is that we've been hiding these UFOs. And three is that we've been hiding these free energy technologies.
Oh,
And so now it's coming out. And the reason why the lamb shift, you see, if you go to Wikipedia and you type lamb shift, it says that the reason there's an excess of energy is because of fluctuations in the vacuum energy field. It says vacuum energy fluctuations.
mm,
This is the technical name they're giving to more energy. Why is it possible to get more energy and out than in? Is
yeah.
because vacuum energy fluctuations. This is the official language now. And the reason why that they released the lamb shift information is because the tokamak is about to be released.
What you mean? It's about to be made to work properly.
Right.
Yeah, the hot nuclear fusion system, like with ITER, the Culham laboratories, things like that.
Right. So let me just give a quick history of that, since I don't think we did that last time. So the first tokamak, the concept, was created in 1958 in Russia. In 1958, they created this idea of this tokamak, and they had written the physics behind it. And then in 1965, the the Europeans poo-pooed on it. They said, "Oh, you guys, there's no free energy, you know, that's not going to work."
Mm.
So it was poo-pooed in 1965. But then in 1968, the British actually sent a team of scientists to Russia to look at their tokamak progress. And then they said, well, this can't be ignored. Okay? It's too much going on there now. This can't be ignored. In 1968, that they stopped poo-pooing on it. And then in 1974, many countries all over the whole world started trying to replicate the tokamak in 1974. And now this is interesting, is because 1974 is the same year where Stephen Hawkins released his book, which talked about Hawkins radiation. Now, this ties in to the Lamb shift. If you go back to Wikipedia and the Lamb shift article, it also mentions Hawkins radiation, because Hawkins radiation is another over unity. It means that energy can be created. You know, the
Mm.
second law of thermodynamics says energy cannot be created or destroyed, but energy can be created. And Stephen Hawking predicted that in 1974, the same year that the global tokamak construction started. Okay, since
Right.
then, Stephen Hawking changed his tune, and he changed his theory on Hawkins radiation. Now, when did that happen? So now the thing is, to finish up this subject on the tokamak. Okay, last year in 2022, China was able to maintain the plasma field for 17 seconds. It was
All
the
right.
world's record of maintaining the plasma field. So then after that, China said, we are going to be ready in 2025. And that's the same date as the French one you just mentioned. The French
ITER.
tokamak ITER is also predicting that they'll be ready in 2025. So this is going to be a really breakthrough thing, because once they announce to the world that we have done it, our tokamak is working, then it's like, wait a minute, how does the tokamak work? A tokamak is creating more energy out than in. I thought that wasn't possible.
Mm.
You know, ever since 1947, you've been telling us it's not possible to get more energy out than in, right?
Yeah.
So that's
ITER.
what I'm saying. This is the third confession, is that they've been lying about you can't get more energy out than in.
Yeah.
And they've
ITER.
known.
It is. I mean, ITER is like they have. I mean, ITER is a huge thing. It's like a gigantic fusion experiment, and it's basically a large version of the MAST experiment, which is just down the road here at Culham, near where I live. But it's said to be the most efficient tokamak ever built. And yeah, I mean, when it's actually if it can maintain a stable plasma like indefinitely, then it
Right.
can then you can easily just rig up a heat exchanger to it, and Bob's your uncle. You
Get
just need
more.
a dynamo, and you've got working power. And
Right.
but this
Free
was
energy.
always yeah. But it is technically over Unity, I think, because
Right.
um,
Definitely.
I can't remember the details
Because
of it, but yeah.
the amount of energy you put in to the magnets to maintain the plasma field is less than the amount of energy you get out in the heat
Mm.
conversion, right?
Yeah,
So that is more energy out than in, is definitely
it's
what.
nuclear fusion. Yeah, it's nuclear fusion, which technically is is over unity because you basically get the energy from the nucleus of the atom itself, as with fission, but it's far more powerful and efficient than nuclear fission, which is a conventional nuclear
Right.
power system. It's also
Right.
safer. It
Right.
doesn't give
Right.
off deadly radiation the way fission does.
Right. So let me come back to this. Um, there's one other subject which is about, you see, this tokamak. They kind of I mentioned that Stephen Hawkins, he had to change his theory about Hawkins radiation
All
because
right.
Hawkins radiation also predicted more energy out than in. So there's another subject which I want to mention here,
Mm.
which is tied into that, is called the EM drive. Okay, if you just go to Wikipedia and you type EM drive, it's called the impossible drive
The M drive,
because
yeah, I've
the
heard of
EM drive
this.
is also over unity, more energy out than in. So let me just tell you the brief history of that really quick
Mm.
because a lot of people don't know about it. In 2001, it was a British guy who received an award from the British government for building this thing. And they gave him this money. They said, take your machine over to America and present it to them. Okay, that was in 2001. But in 2002, he started having heating problems. The thing was overheating. Okay, and then in 2006, he designed a water cooling system for it to try to keep it cool. And then finally, as soon as he did that, the New Scientist magazine published an article called the EM Drive, where the Scientist magazine was like, wow, this guy has created an amazing kind of EM drive, which is defying the laws of physics, more energy out than in. And then in 2008, China bought into it. They said, oh, we want to invest in that. And then in 2009, this British guy was allowed to demonstrate his machine to Boeing in America. Boeing, the major company. They said, okay, bring us your machine. So he brought them their machine. And then in 2012, Boeing made the official announcement that, yes, we have bought into this technology. We're researching it. In 2012, Boeing admitted that. In 2014, some NASA scientists tried to write a quantum mechanical theory of how this machine is working. 2014, NASA admitted that this is worth looking into. But as soon as NASA did that in 2015, then they started poo-pooing on it. No, 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 you can't get more energy out than in.
Oh
So
dear.
that's
Mm.
so this is around the so so this is tied into why did Stephen Hawkins have to change his Hawkins radiation? Because like they had to poo-poo on that. Wait a minute, don't tell the public the tokamak is real. Don't tell the public this EM drive is real. Don't tell the public about Hawkins radiation. So they around this time they had to start poo-pooing on all these over unity devices. But even though the scientific magazine started poo-pooing on it in 2015, in 2016, NASA themselves admitted successful trials with this EM drive.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
then and then
can I just point out, this reminds me very much of the cold fusion cover-up in 1989. It was the objection to it was purely theoretical. It seems it was like it was just, well, we don't know how it works, but the thing is, as long as you get the results, you can use it. It doesn't necessarily matter if you can't create a theoretical model to explain its function. As long as the function works, you can use it for practical purposes.
right. So let's come back to the last little subject here is my own personal. I want to finish telling some of my own personal stories here because I've been doing free energy research ever since 1999. I mentioned that at my university, in Portland State University, is the university where they officially suppressed the cold fusion
Yeah.
experiments, because I met the people and I asked them what happened to those cold fusion experiments, and they said they denied us access to the materials we needed to continue doing those experiments. So I heard about that in 1999, that they've been suppressing free energy. And so I dedicated my life to that. How can we bring this free energy? And so I have some stories, which there's a free energy community. We used to have a web page called the PES Wiki, but that web page was taken down, and now you have this. Well, there's overunity.com, which some people still use, but it's that whole thing kind of died out. There's some groups who are still doing it today in America, and they've had some successes, but I'm not going to mention that now. I want to talk about the suppression of free energy because I have firsthand experience with this, okay? So the first thing is the most popular name, which everybody knows, is Stanley Myers, right?
Yeah. Water
Stanley
power car.
Myers, right. Now, there's a version of this story which the people don't know. And it's really important I tell this story, okay? Because I have a friend who used to be very good friends with Stanley Myers, okay? Now, what happened was in the 1980s, Stanley Myers was working with a team of scientists who were building a magnetic motor which was able to get more energy out than in. It was a pulse motor. They were sending pulses into the magnets, and they were pulling energy out of the magnets, and the amount of energy they were getting out was greater than the amount of energy putting in. Now, this took place in the 80s, and then what happened was, as soon as they did that, the U.S. Army came in and said, this machine belongs to us now, and we don't want you guys to talk about what you have done here. Now, Stanley Myers and one of my good friends was part of that team who built that magnetic motor in the 80s. Now, what happened was Stanley Myers was basically under contract not to talk about over Unity. And he broke that contract once he released his hydrogen car. Okay. So that's why he was poisoned.
That
So
explains it, yeah.
this is the part of the story. Now there's a little bit more to this story. Is I might have mentioned this last time, but I have another friend who's a Hong Kong uh, scientist who was he wrote a mathematical paper about the theory of momentum of electromagnetic devices and how you can utilize the momentum of the spinning wheel to get more energy out than in. He wrote a mathematical paper about this back in the 90s, and then the US Army read his paper and they said, your paper describes this machine that we have here. So he was invited to America and he was given access, and he saw the machine which my friend had built in the 80s. He actually made a video of it.
I mean, you've got
So
some on your YouTube channel. Because you've got some demonstrations on your YouTube channel of this, I think.
yeah, that was a later prototype that he had personally built later in the 2000s. I met him. I think it was 2009 where he made a successful prototype, and I made a video of that back then. So that was the same guy. Okay. So all these kind of stories, it's a small world. All these stories tie in.
Yeah.
Anyway, let me tell you some other of my own personal stories here because people never heard these stories before. Um, the second story is mm, the Magna Coaster. Okay, the Magna Coaster. This was a suppressed energy. So what happened was there was a Canadian guy, and he had done a similar thing where he had created a motor where he was sending pulses and he was able to get more energy out. And then my friend went to him and said, you know, you don't even need a spinning motor to do that. You can just use a permanent magnet and an electromagnet and get the same results. You can do it in a solid state object with no movement at all. So my friend was guiding him, and he actually did it. He actually created a successful prototype. Okay. And then he came onto this television show in Canada called The Dragon's Den. Okay. And the Dragon's Den was a television show where inventors would present their inventions to
Oh
certain
yeah,
millionaires.
we got a
Okay.
version of that over here. Yeah, and I didn't realize Canada had one too.
Right. So this guy presented his box. It was just a box, you know, that was charging batteries. Energy would come out of the batteries into the magnets and come back into the battery. And then he had an inverter, it could light up some lights, and it was working 24/7. He had done it, solid state. He was the first one to do it solid state without a spinning wheel.
Mm.
Okay. And so I became friends with him, and he made some business mistakes though. You see, what happened was he came onto this Dragon's Den show, and this millionaire guy said, "Okay, I'm going to invest in your technology," and he gave him a bunch of money, but then he gave some stipulations. There was some red tape along with the money. You have to do it this way. You have to work together with the Canadian power company. Blah blah blah. He had put all these stipulations with the money, and you also have to sign over the patent to the Canadian Army. And then
Oh no.
finally, the guy was like, "No, I'm not going to sign over my patent." And so then he got cut off from all that money. So then he's like, okay, I have no more money. What am I going to do? So then he made the big mistake. He says, I'm going to start taking pre-orders. Okay, I'm going to start, everybody, you can buy your machine now. And then when the machine's ready, I'm going to deliver it to you later. So that was his mistake. He started taking a lot of money from people. But then he found out he actually delivered one machine to one company, okay, in Spain. And then that company, he had given them like an instruction manual, like this is step 1, step 2, step 3, and he sent it in the mail to Spain, and that Spanish company like didn't follow the instructions, and the machine blew up. And so
Oh no.
so then like anyhow,
That's just what the
and
debunker
then
wants.
right, so let's see, what year was this? This was around 2009. Around 2009 was that he just ran out of money, and and what happened was he made some other mistakes. Was that he what was happening was that he was blowing up the batteries. The batteries were dying. You know, so So he said the solution to this problem is to replace the batteries with the capacitors. The capacitors can handle that. But he ran out of money. So that was like, and then, you know, he just ran out of money. He couldn't do that anymore. And a lot of people got mad at him because they had given him money. And they're like, I had also given him money. I was on his waiting list. He was supposed to deliver a device to me, but he ran out of money to go, he had to go back to the drawing board to get the capacitors instead of batteries, and he just ran out of money. And so that's what happened to him. But that story didn't end there, because what happened, I eventually got my hands on one of his early prototypes because I knew his mentor, So I got my hands on one of his early prototypes, and
Okay.
I brought it to China, and I started reverse engineering it, you know. And I have a video on my channel which is called "Who Killed the Magna Coaster," where I'm showing the process of me reverse engineering this thing. But the problem was there was two magic numbers. There's two frequencies. There's the input frequency and the output frequency. And I never knew those magic numbers. And I also eventually ran out of funding to do that. It would have taken me a long, long, long time to try to find those magic numbers. Eventually, I might do that someday, you know.
Hmm.
But, I just don't have money right now to continue that research. So
So that's
anyway,
always
it's
the
not.
problem, getting investors, isn't it? I'm really shocked that I don't know the Canadian version of the Dragon's Den. I mean, they always had various people on it. I know the original one had Donald Trump in the United States. We had Alan Sugar over here and a couple of other people, but I didn't realize that someone who supposedly in that situation would actually be in contact some way with the government, and that they would start trying to rein it in with various conditions. I mean,
Yeah.
they do though. I mean, John Hutchison talked. He was a Canadian as well. He mentions this as well. This process.
Yeah.
Mm.
Okay, so that's the end of my Magna Coaster story. Let me tell you another interesting story, which a lot of people don't know. It's called the Z power. Z power. So this is a very interesting story. So I met the people from Z power, and he told me his story. What happened was he had built this little thing which could light up a light bulb a long time ago, like back in the 80s. Let me tell the full story. What happened was, originally he was working on cancer. He was working on the Raymond Rife machine, and he built a Raymond Rife machine, and he started trying to answer. But then he found that his Raymond Rife machine was putting out more energy than was coming in. So then he changed his thing. He says, I'm not going to focus on cancer anymore, because that's like a no-no subject. If I start telling people I can cure cancer, they're going to kill me. So he started focusing on over unity machines. And he had made one back in the 80s. It was a solid state. There was no moving parts, and it could light up a light bulb. And then eventually he moved to the Philippines, and he was getting money from the Philippine government, and he developed an entire power station, a free energy. He was the world's first person to make a free energy power station, where he was
Hmm.
feeding electricity into the. Now, his technology is the Nikola Tesla technology. Okay, the theory behind the Wardenclyffe Tower is that you can not only transmit wireless energy, but you can also pull in energy from the magnetosphere of the
Yeah.
Earth. So it is powerful, and that he was the first guy to actually do it. He actually did it. So he built a power station in the Philippines. And then I asked him what happened to that. He said there was some kind of a military coup where they kicked out the president. I don't know which president, because basically almost every president of the Philippines has been kicked out due to a military coup. There
It
was
seems to be
so
quite
it,
it's unstable kind of society.
yeah, they always blame them for embezzling money and stuff like that. But anyway, I don't know what the year it was, but eventually that president was kicked out, and then he took his power station and he hid it inside of some shipping containers, You know, he has this working power station which is hidden inside of some shipping stage containers in the Philippines. And then he went back to America, and that's when I met him. And
Yeah.
he says, you know, I'm trying to get funding, and I have the power station hidden, but you know, it couldn't be improved, you know. And I started giving him some advice on how to improve his power station.
So it's just he just dismantled it and put it into shipping containers. He dismantled all
Right,
the equipment.
right.
Is it still in the Philippines now? These shipping
Yeah, I
containers.
think so, because it's been several years since I talked to him. Um, and I could go into a lot of detail, but the important thing here is, how does this thing work? This is the thing, because I knew him quite well, because I was giving him advice on how to improve his power station.
It's
He
called
asked
in
me,
the Z something.
Z power, Z
Is that
power.
is that Z as in Z double E? It was the
Just the
letter
Z, the
Z.
letter Z. Yeah, the
Oh, right,
letter Z
yeah, that's we just
power.
call it Z in England, but yeah,
Yeah,
Z power, right?
yeah. It's hard to find them. But there is a YouTube channel, which if you want to find the link, I can send you the link.
Thanks, mate. Cheers.
Um, so now the thing is, if you go to overunity.com, there's all these people making theories. How did that machine work? I'm actually the best one to know, because I spoke to him quite in detail about it. So the way it works is that he has some metal plates, and he is resonating these plates. And at first he was using the Schumann frequencies. He was resonating these plates with the Schumann frequencies, and then he started noticing he could get more energy out than in. Okay, and then he started looking at the output, the frequencies he was getting out, and he says he found that if I just give double, triple, he started hitting it with extra frequencies. So he has not just one frequency coming into this plate, but he could use his oscilloscope to find out what other frequencies this machine was asking for, and give those machine those frequencies, and then the output would increase more. And then he found the third set of frequencies, so he gave it those frequencies. So the machine was telling him what to do. It was like, give me this, and then I'll give you more. Give me this, I'll give you more. So that's the process of how he built it, you know. This is and this is the Tesla. This is what Tesla's dream was
Mm,
just to pull energy from the Earth's magnetosphere. Okay? And the
mm.
machine will tell you what is the natural frequencies in order to increase the output, you know. So this is the story of the Z power, you know. A
Mm.
lot of people, I hope a lot of people will hear this story.
I hope
Okay?
so. Yeah, I hope so. It's interesting. It's like these things do pop up in unexpected places. You know, I didn't know there was actually a working power station in the Philippines. Was it actually attached to the electric grid and it was loaded
Right.
and people were using the power
Right.
and
The last time I spoke to him, he said that he was trying to work with some Native American Indians. You see, in America, the Native Americans live on these pieces of land, Indian reservations, where
mm,
they have the right to rule themselves on that piece of land. Okay? So he said that was several years ago. He said, I'm starting to work with some Indians who invited me into their Indian reservation because they have the authority to put this free energy device onto their Indian reservation. I
oh,
don't know
okay.
if that actually I don't know if that actually
Mm,
panned out, but a couple years ago that he told me that was his plan. Okay, so I haven't talked to him
right.
in several years, but
Oh,
I'm, you
that'd
know,
be interesting though, because I mean I know that the Indian reservations they have like their own sort of limited government. They have like their own
right,
tribal elders and they have their own police forces and things like that. But
right,
that's interesting. I'd be interested. It'd
yeah,
be quite something if they. I mean, I know that we talked before about the Maldives. I don't know how that's going along, but the Maldive Islands in the Indian Ocean, there was some kind of project going on then that was going to publish a paper. I haven't heard anything about that since.
right. So let me tell you a couple other stories that, because I have firsthand experience with this,
Sure.
is first of all, I think I mentioned this last time, but let's just say it again. You know, the Infinity SAV. Let me just mention this story again because I knew that guy was that he was killed. Okay, it was a Russian guy, and he came up with this business plan where he went to South Korea and he got some investments there in South Korea and he started this company. Now, he didn't he didn't do the mistake of taking pre-orders. You know, that that was really stupid, you know, if somebody does pre-orders. So he was just like, no, no, no. He says, once my machine is done, then you can buy a machine. Okay. So that was a good thing. But unfortunately, he chose South Korea to do this in because the South Korean government is run by Freemasons. And actually tried to warn him about that. I'm like, don't do this in South Korea. It's not safe. But anyway, he didn't listen to me.
Oh dear.
So that's what happened to the Infinity SAV was that he had he had started subcontracting. He had found contractors. He's like, you make this. He found different manufacturers. He said, I want you to manufacture this part of the machine, and I want you to manufacture that part of the machine, and another person manufacture. So nobody knew what the whole machine was, right?
Just
Everybody had a
compartmentalized, yeah.
yeah. So, but he was the only person who knew what the bigger picture. And once they killed him, it was over. Nobody else knew how
Oh
to
dear.
do it.
Mm.
But it's not completely over because he also had a mentor, and that mentor is a French guy who knew the complete workings of the machine. So even though that guy is dead, it's not a gone project. It will come back someday in the future, hopefully.
Oh, good. Fingers crossed, yeah.
So that's the story of the Infinity SAV. And now there's one other last story, which we mentioned last time, but I think it's good to mention again, is the Holcomb device. The Holcomb device. Now, this is interesting because I have a friend who's a NASA employee who works in the free energy department. Basically, NASA sends him out, go find some free energy devices and bring them back to us.
NASA has a free energy department.
They do,
They
yes.
do.
And
Oh,
that and my friend is working in that, you know. I never talked
that's
to this guy about the moon landing hoax, but I did talk to him about the suppression of free energy. And I asked him, I said, don't you think NASA is going to be taking part in the suppression of this? And he says, yeah, it's, there is a lot of money involved, but anyway, that's my job. My job is to go out and bring them these machines,
well. They worked on the M drive, like we were saying earlier. They did
Right, exactly,
take that
the EM
seriously.
drive.
Yeah.
Right. And so anyway, so regarding the Holcomb device, like that was he had told me right now, this was like last year, he told me right now we're testing the Holcomb device. And in our last interview, I told you to search YouTube for Holcomb, and then you
Yeah.
said all I'm finding now is the people poo-pooing on it,
Yeah.
you
I
know.
found a satire video. Yeah.
Right. So that was, you see, you had found about it. Then right as soon as you told me, I wrote a letter to my NASA friend. I said, "What happened to the Holcomb device?" And he told me, "Yeah, NASA poo-pooed on it. They found it's not working, and they're gonna maybe even sue the guy or something for fraud or something."
Oh dear.
And it's like that probably means it was actually working, you know.
That's what usually happens.
So
Yeah. They say it's.
right. But then he sent me a new list. He said there's two new devices which I have recently brought into NASA since the Holcomb. But I don't want to mention their names because every time I mention somebody's name, like that device, either that person ends up dead or that device gets poo-pooed on, you know. So it's I don't know. It's kind of weird that my friend is bringing them technology. But maybe, maybe he's just an extreme optimist. Like someday NASA will stop poo-pooing on these things,
Well,
you know.
if they admit to the other things, if they admit, for example, they faked the moon landings, and then there's these other admissions for tokamaks and things like
Right,
that, then maybe they will. Maybe if once the scientific landscape and the intellectual environment changes, then maybe they will. You never know.
right.
I don't
Well,
know.
that's what
Yeah,
I'm hoping for. That's what I'm
fingers
hoping
crossed.
for.
Yeah, I've got a question to ask you. Have you heard of the air gen?
Um,
It
no,
says here. It says here. This was in the news a couple of months ago. I was going to write an article about it, but then I went on the tour. AirGen connects electrodes to protein nanowires in such a way that electrical current is generated from the water vapor naturally present in the atmosphere.
right.
What did you know for that?
I have a video on my YouTube channel. Video number 2 is called an air deionizer generator, which
Right.
it sounds basically like that. There's ions in the air, and it's I would like to figure that out myself, how to build that. But I have my friend in Hong Kong had built that machine, and
Right.
he was just pulling ions out of the air. So that's what it sounds like to me.
Yeah, it's something. It's actually there's a company now running it. There's a Vice article here. Scientists make breakthrough that they've invented a device that can continuously generate electricity from thin air, offering a glimpse of a possible sustainable energy source that can be made from almost any material and runs on the ambient humidity that surrounds all of us. I mean, I
Right. So
don't know
the
how
thing
that works
the thing
exactly.
is this. Well, yeah, it's most likely taking ions from the air. So the thing is, um, the many companies sell what's known as an air ionizer,
Hmm.
and it's just a machine which uses electricity to send ions into the air because human beings need ions in the air. It's very healthy for us, you
Yeah,
know.
they're health.
So
That's
so
the
that's
health devices. Yeah.
so if you build a generator which is taking ions from the air, that's the opposite. It means it would not be very healthy to be around that machine because you're breathing in air without any ions. But my friends, what are the primary sources of ions is the ocean waves.
Hmm.
When the ocean waves break, it releases ions into the air. So this is why my friend was living in Hong Kong, and there was a lot of ions in the air because he lived next to the ocean.
Right, because
So that,
when the waves broke on beaches and things like that, which is Hong Kong, of course, is a series of islands and peninsulas.
right, right.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. Yeah. Oh, cool. Well, Raza, is that all you have to say for this particular time?
Yep, that's the end of my presentation, and I'm glad I got to get all this information out. Thanks so much for
Well, you're
listening to
very
my
welcome.
story.
You're very welcome.